Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Sarah. So I make videos about all kinds of movies, and even if you don't see me posting anything here, I am first and foremost a writer. So I do have a movie blog called Eating Film where I have a lot of blog posts on a wide variety of movies. I have a pretty wide appetite, which is why my blog is called Eating Film. So if you guys are interested, when I'm not posting here, definitely check out my blog. I put together some really cool images and stills so that you guys can get a feel for the movie in a way that may not be able to convey here. So the blog posts tend to be a lot longer and go more in depth. So if you're interested, check that out and I'll make sure to link it below. But today I wanted to talk about To Catch a Killer. Now, To Catch a Killer came out this year, I believe, and caught my attention because it seemed to be in the very traditional vein of a cat and mouse crime thriller, where there's been a despicable crime and we are looking from the perspective of the detectives and the policemen or other professionals that are assigned to the case to catch the killer. I'm not gonna lie, the trailer got me. The way that they framed the story and the crime itself was very different, quite unique. Although that the crime itself has been done before in these types of movies, this is a little bit different. Like everything that you think about certain characters or certain plot points is a little bit different in this version of To Catch a Killer. The movie starts out, it's New Year's. I think the clock has just struck like 12:01 and fireworks are going off, people are celebrating, and all of a sudden you hear fireworks explosions and then a gunshot and somebody just falls down. If you're sensitive to that type of violence in movies, I recommend that you skip it. If you can't handle gun violence in film, which I totally understand, you definitely want to skip this one. So from there on, what I really miss about crime thrillers is how much of a role the city itself plays. Not just because it has the typical, hey, it's a big city, so there are lots of tall buildings, lots of high rises, there's subways, not just because it has the components of a city, but being at ground level and like running from block to block and seeing like there's a hospital there's a diner on the corner, seeing all of the little things that make up the world that they're building in this film, and it made it feel very real. It's supposed to be set in Baltimore. The way that they start the story, bringing us up here where we're looking at people in their high-rise penthouse apartments, bringing in the new year, and then these gunshots and people screaming and crying, and then all of a sudden we're at a ground level and we're watching one of our main protagonists, played by Shailene Woodley, walking into a diner because the manager has called her in there because there's a woman who he says is disturbing the customers, but the customers are like, she's not bothering us. She's sitting at a table, she is drinking out of a brown paper bag, but otherwise it's not causing any kinds of disturbance. So she's kind of getting into it a little bit with the manager when she gets the call and ends up going to the first site. Although it is a crime thriller and the story seems to be framed in a very traditional way where we have crime, we have where our main protagonist was when the crime started happening, their responses to the scenes, etc. And then us following them, what happens afterwards? In movies like Heat, when they go home, what is their home life like? So afterwards, when she goes home, we see her apartment. You see she has a pet as she goes through her coping skills, we'll say, where she goes down to the pool and she swims laps. You know, all of that feels very authentic, feels very real for this type of character. Where in a lot of crime thrillers, I've noticed some of the characters are kind of like put on a pedestal, like they're never tired, they're never hungry, and they can work for days on end without there being any consequences in terms of how they talk to people, how they talk, you know, to their loved ones, etc. Here, it's much more grounded in reality, where it's like, no, they can't work for hours and hours on end. I appreciate how we're going through authentic steps in dealing with a crime, because sometimes, you know, a crime thriller will start and you'll notice that a cop off the street somehow has access to a crime that the FBI has jurisdiction, and you're wondering how they had access to such a scene, like right off the street. For example, when she gets to the second site and it hasn't been secured yet, but there has been a fire, because I don't want to give too much of it away because it did just come out. Firemen go in with SWAT. Makes sense. They have to have the fire put out, and SWAT is not trained to do that. That's what I'm talking about. What I mean when certain law enforcement agencies are sort of showing up and you're like, what is your purpose here? So in this case, it was highly organized. It's like, boom, we got a fire. Fireman has to go in, but they can't go in unprotected, especially when the scene has not been secured. On the heels of them coming out, she is going in, and that's how she had access to the scene. Because I'm like, look, don't force a character into an environment that they normally would never have access to. The way that she managed to get access made a lot of sense, and it felt very authentic and very real. She ran up 17 flights, which I believe, especially when later you learn that she applied to be a member of the FBI. So her determination feels very real. Her desire to be involved and to put her 2 cents in also feels very real, feels very ambitious for her. Huge case, beginning of the year. What set this film apart, how we got to see more behind the curtain, more behind the scenes. So instead of staying with the detectives that are investigating the case, gathering evidence, having it analyzed, getting the results back, interviewing people, we're able to see the higher levels where you have members of government influencing the direction that the investigation is taking. That adds a perspective to a crime thriller that I don't think shows up very often in these kinds of films, because we're all concerned with who did this, you know, who has committed this terrible crime, and you need to find him and you need to stop him because this is awful and terrible. Now we're seeing like the puppet masters behind the scenes that are seriously intruding on this investigation because of their political aspirations. And that also feels very of the times. So as the investigation moves on, we're seeing more and more of that kind of influence in who they're allowed to pursue and who they're not allowed to pursue. Like the evidence that is ignored and the evidence that is taken at full face value. There's a lot of tension coming from a lot of different areas because we are on the clock because major crime. And the people want answers, and the politicians need to know what to tell the people, and so many other driving forces that are pulling at this case in particular. It was kind of hard to get a grip on. I think they could have done a better job at letting the viewer know who these people are in relation to this case and the city. They're following leads, they're interviewing people, and another crime occurs. At this point, we're not surprised by this. What we're learning about the possible responsible party is very disturbing, very enlightening. I don't want to go too far into it. I'll probably write more in a longer blog post, but because it came out so recently, I don't want to give too much of it away. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I did. I would recommend it. I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars. You guys let me know what you think if you saw the movie. We could talk in the comments. I feel like we as the audience would have had a stronger like emotional connection to her and the other characters if we just knew a little bit more about them. But I wonder if that distance was there on purpose to show that, you know, the distance that we have between ourselves and like law enforcement is we don't know them. We know what they're supposed to do, you know, their jobs, but we don't know them as people. And I wonder if that is supposed to mimic that. I just feel like there would have been more of a connection in there if we knew just a little bit more about the characters. Number one, if they just said each other's name more often. Just say each other's name more often. There's a large cast here, a lot of secondary characters we only see a handful of times. My memory is not that great. If they had just like repeated each other's names or, you know, told stories about each other, like little specific things to their character, I think would have added more memorable exchanges there. Guys, let me know what you think. And thank you for watching and spending your time here with me today. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time.